Ross & Co.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello and welcome to The Briefing with me, Gloria De Piero. Lots coming up in the next hour. We're talking about children with cancer, with a mum who lost her 10-year-old daughter last year and her MP who's leading a debate today in Parliament. Plus, spiking. We're going to be joined by Safeguarding Minister Rachel McLean. Animal cruelty we're talking about, the cost of living and football too. That's all after the news. Good afternoon, it's just gone 12 o'clock. I'm Rosie Wright, here to keep you up to date on GB News. Russia is accusing NATO of waging a proxy war with Moscow by arming Ukraine. Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov says weapons sent to Kyiv by the West are legitimate targets. But the UK Armed Forces Minister James Heappey says individual countries are supplying military aid, not NATO.
NATO is reinforcing the alliance's eastern flank as a defensive measure to reassure our Eastern European allies. NATO is not the donor community. Many of the people in the donor community are NATO countries, but similarly, Australians, the Kiwis and others are part of it as well.
Well, Lavrov also accused the West of flouting the principles of multilateralism. The comments came during a meeting with the UN Secretary-General in Moscow. Antonio Guterres is also speaking to President Vladimir Putin and will travel to Ukraine for talks with President Zelensky on Thursday. Mr. Guterres called for the war in Ukraine to end as soon as possible.
We are extremely interested in finding ways in order to create the conditions for effective dialogue, create the conditions for a ceasefire as soon as possible, create the conditions for a peaceful solution.
Meanwhile, the US Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin hosted more than 40 countries for talks in Germany to coordinate security assistance for Ukraine. It follows his trip to Kiev, where he announced more than £500 million in additional military support. Germany's also agreed to send anti-aircraft systems to the country. Austin says Ukraine can win the war.
My trip to Kyiv reinforced my admiration for the way that the Ukrainian armed forces are deploying these capabilities. Ukraine clearly believes that it can win, and so does everyone here.
In some other news now, the Labour Party is again calling for an emergency budget to tackle the cost of living crisis. They've reiterated the need, they say, for a windfall tax on oil and gas companies. The Prime Minister's urging his cabinet to come up with innovative ideas to ease the financial pressure on households without relying on new government spending. Private companies are being told they too must play their part. The Speaker of the House of Commons is meeting with the editor of the Mail on Sunday over an article published about the Deputy Labour leader, which has widely been condemned as sexist. An anonymous Conservative MP was quoted as saying that Angela Rayner used her legs to distract Boris Johnson during Prime Minister's questions. The Speaker described it as misogynistic and offensive. The number of children in the UK with hepatitis has risen to 114, according to the World Health Organization. 10 have needed a liver transplant. The UK Health Security Agency say most of the cases of liver inflammation are in under fives. Experts are still trying to understand the cause of the spike in hepatitis. Twitter's founder, Jack Dorsey, is welcoming a £34 billion takeover of the company by the world's richest man. He says Elon Musk's bid is the only solution he trusts. The Tesla chief executive is buying the company for £42.20 a share. Twitter originally rejected the offer, but the board reconsidered when Mr. Musk demonstrated he had secured the finances for the deal. In the US now, body cam showing the aftermath of the fatal shooting of the cinematographer Helena Hutchins. Police are still investigating the shooting last October by the actor Alec Baldwin on the Rust film set. Video's also been released of Baldwin drawing the gun during a rehearsal. He told police that it should have been empty or loaded with blanks.
It should have been a cold gun with no rounds inside or dummy rounds, cosmetic rounds, no flash. I take the gun out slowly, I cock the pistol, bang, it goes up, she hits the ground, she goes down. He goes down, screaming. He's like, Jesus Christ, and I'm going. And I thought that maybe sometimes the wadding can come out if you're close and you get a burn.
The film's director, Joel Souza, was also shot but survived. Well, he described to police what happened.
Sorry,
It's okay, take
a very loud bang. And it felt like somebody kicked me in the shoulder, and then I was down on my and then I looked over and see the cinematographer, Helena Hutchins, with blood coming out of her back.
Holding a what? I'm sorry?
With blood coming out of her back.
Okay.
She was between me and I think where the gun went off, and I think it went through her and into me.
You're now up to date on GB News. We'll keep you up to date across the day. Now let's head to the briefing with Gloria.
Coming up this hour on The Briefing, I'll speak to a mother who lost her 10-year-old daughter last year to an aggressive form of cancer, and her MP, Conservative MP Caroline Dinenage, who is debating cancer outcomes in Parliament today. How can children and parents be better supported? And have you or someone in your family been spiked on a night out? It's on the rise. Safeguarding Minister Rachel McLean joins me to talk about how we tackle it. We're a nation of animal lovers, or so we like to think. I'll talk with Conservative MP Andrew Rosendale about his measures to fine people up to £5,000 for animal cruelty. It will be made law this week. And we're talking football with Labour MP Justin Madders. The government's responded to a fan-led review into English football. They're considering allowing alcohol during games. Is that a good idea? And email me to let me know about that or anything else on the show. gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet me at gbnews. The death of a child is every parent's worst nightmare. And last year, Charlotte Farewell lost her 10-year-old daughter Sophie to an aggressive form of cancer. Today, for the first time, childhood cancer outcomes will be fully debated in Parliament. Charlotte and Conservative MP Caroline Dinenage are working together for new measures that would change how doctors are trained to spot and treat cancer amongst children and campaign for parents to spot the signs. I'm pleased to be joined by Charlotte, Sophie's mum, and Caroline Dinenage, Conservative MP and former Health Minister. Thank you both for coming in. Charlotte, just tell us what happened to Sophie when she was diagnosed and the timeline of what happened following that diagnosis.
Yep, so she was quite poorly in the sort of July and August of 2020. She was having stomach pains, feeling sick. She was unable to eat until like after lunchtime. And that became much more consistent. I'd obviously gone contacted the GP surgery, and obviously had a number of telephone calls, but we actually did manage to get one appointment face-to-face, because obviously this was all during lockdown. And they did obviously feel her tummy, they felt, and it was a bowel infection, and that hopefully it would get better on its own. Then a few weeks later, she started bleeding. So I phoned back to the surgery and they said it would be her first period. She'd just turned 9. I was insistent that this wasn't. I wanted it recorded that it wasn't. And then after 8 days of bleeding, I took her to A&E, and this was in the 5th of September 2020, and they said how long she had this lump for. And they found a 12-centimetre tumour in her abdomen. So following that, she obviously had surgery, a very long surgery to try and remove the tumour. They weren't sure at that point whether it was benign tumour or cancerous, but after the surgery, the surgeon said this is cancer, and they managed to remove 95% of the tumour, but they couldn't remove it all. Then we went through 9 rounds of chemotherapy, very aggressive chemotherapy, and 7 weeks of radiotherapy throughout that. We managed to get rid of the majority of the cancer. There was only a tiny, tiny bit of residual bit left. She went on maintenance chemo. This was in the end of April last year. And 8 weeks later, she relapsed whilst on maintenance chemo. And we know that relapsing whilst on treatment, is not good. And she had had so many treatments, so much toxicity in her, that we couldn't have the side effects that she was suffering with, meant that we couldn't have the normal relapse treatment. And anything that was offered was about biding us time rather than actually a cure. We know now that those with solid tumours, there's around 8% chance of survival if you relapse. So it's dismal figures that you're working with. So we tried a more of a palliative sort of chemo. We tried to see one that would try and hold it, but sadly it didn't work. It continued to grow at the fast rate that it was going at. So we made the decision to stop any further treatment, because it's not fair to keep giving her drugs that is not doing anything to her. She set out on completing her bucket list in the July and the August, and she sadly died in the September last year.
Thank you so much for explaining that to us. It must be very difficult, but it's part of the campaign to explain it, so thank you. Caroline, cancer is the biggest cause of death amongst children, and yet, incredibly, today, this will be the first time that the issue has been the subject of a full debate in the House of Commons. That's thanks to you. How come it's taken so long?
I just don't know, Gloria, and we were flabbergasted. It has been the subject of adjournment debates, at the end of the day, in Westminster Hall debates, but never in the full chamber of the House of Commons that we can find has childhood cancer outcomes been the subject of a main discussion, which is, when you consider how many discussions we've had recently about, parties in Downing Street, and this is something that literally could save lives in the future. So that's why it's so important, and that's why we've had a lot of support from MPs across the House, because this is something that impacts people up and down the country. There are bereaved families that have contacted me from up and down the country, and I'm so pleased that Charlotte brought it to my attention and we can work together to try and do something about it.
And Charlotte, tell me when you decided to reach out to your MP and why you decided to go to your MP, Caroline.
Yeah, so for some people it might be strange, but it was not long after Sophie died. I think it was early October of last year, so she died mid-September. And I was just so determined. I do not want any mum to have to sit and watch their child die. I can't even begin to describe how horrific that is, and how we have to stop this. This is something that could be treated, and we could have saved her, had more investment and research gone into this. It is the #1 killer, as you said, of children, yet we have 3% of all funding, cancer funding, going to children.
Wow.
No wonder, and that's over 88 different types of children's cancer. No wonder there has been no change in decades for certain type of cancers.
And Caroline, you must remember when you first met Charlotte. Just tell me about that meeting.
Yeah, well, I do remember it very vividly. We met in my office in Gosport, and first of all, we talked about Sophie's remarkable legacy. You know, Charlotte said she had a wish list, a bucket list of things that she wanted to achieve. You know, she wanted all the things we all want, Gloria. She wanted a pair of high heels. She wanted to cook with Gordon Ramsay, and the family set about delivering that for her. But where she was remarkable, Sophie, was that she had also things she wanted to achieve that would improve the experience for others. So she looked around and she saw that the play facilities in the hospital weren't very good, and that the play specialists that they provide weren't there at weekends, and if one of them was off, there was no replacement. And so she really wanted to see better play facilities in hospitals, and she raised £6,000 by herself, direct painting ceramics in hospital, to buy more toys for her hospital. She was amazing. So we were sort of inspired by that story of this young lady who, despite her incredible illness and struggles, really wanted to try and change the environment for other people. But then, what really struck me was when Charlotte started talking to me about her own experiences and about how really quite easily we could change the environment as to how we detect and how we treat and how we care for children with cancer, just with a little bit of additional support and backing.
And is that what you're going to be pressing for in this debate today? And because you'll be able to the minister will hear you.
Yeah.
You're looking for answers, and what sort of answers are you looking for today?
So first and foremost, it's quite audacious, but what Charlotte and I are going to be asking for is, or I'm going to be asking for on Charlotte's behalf, is a mission. We want a childhood cancer mission. We saw when we lost our dear colleague Tessa Jowell, how there was a brain cancer mission that the government and research and charities and funders and scientists all came together to try and move the dial on brain cancer, and it's worked. It's had very, very strong success, and we'd like to do something similar with childhood cancer. It's about that early detection. It's about parents being equipped with the tools they need to spot the signs and symptoms. It's not about scaremongering, but it is about making sure parents understand that this is the biggest killer of children under the age of 14. It's not as rare as it's portrayed, but it's also about equipping GPs with the information that they need and the support they need to do that early diagnosis, because we know that with children's cancer more than any other, that early diagnosis is absolutely crucial to finding that cure. But also it's about investing in these treatments and the research, because, as Charlotte said, far too little money and effort and time goes into researching children's cancers. It really is the Cinderella of cancer research.
That's a big list, but I think everybody watching will wish you very well in ticking every single one of those off. Your experience has turned you into a campaigner. I was reading that in December you met the Health Secretary. And one of the things that you raised was your experience. Of course, you were with your daughter when she was in hospital. Just talked to us about the lack of support, actually, for parents while you were in hospital with Sophie.
Yeah, so, I mean, I don't know if we only know our experience through COVID. We obviously were in a room on our own, just me and Sophie. I was with her, didn't leave her side from when she was diagnosed, obviously till the very end. The parents aren't fed in hospital. In fact, we've obviously found out that only 15% of hospitals in the country feed parents. That's 1/5.
Really? So mum's hungry while she's trying to look after her darling daughter.
And I know I had my mum message recently, and she'd been in hospital and hadn't eaten for 5 days because she wasn't able to leave her child. And this is 2022. We are in, we aren't in a country where we can't get access to food. We should be feeding parents. The one parent that stays should be fed. And Sophie used to get really angry about this. I used to feel sorry for the person coming in and giving her food, because she'd be like, "Why are you not feeding my mum? She has no choice to be here, and yet you're not feeding her." And, it's not their fault. This is on a much bigger level. But it is true. There is you can't either leave your child, or you have financially, there are parents that can't afford to. There's been a study recently that's been done by the NHS England, and they found that on average, parents are paying £15 a day, one parent, to feed themselves in hospital because of the cost of what it costs in hospital. Which, you know, with the current climate that's going on, there's parents that can't afford to do that. So they're having to make the sacrifice of not, and yet they're expected to try and care for their child. Some of these children were not going home well. Like Sophie, I used to be obviously her carer when she would go home. We need to be looking after the parents as well.
Absolutely.
Really important.
Absolutely. And just finally, I think you're such a powerful campaigner, by the way. I really do. You can't help but be moved by listening to what you have been through. But part of the reason why we do these items is because actually MPs can help. And so we're trying to show that side of an MP's job as well. Sorry. So you have found it useful to reach out to your MP and it's helped you to get the things.
Yeah, I can't thank Caroline enough. There has been MPs, you know, there were 650 MPs plus that could have changed this, you know, decades ago in my eyes. But Caroline, you know, I took my story to her and said, I asked her to help. And I give her juice. Caroline has been incredible. She is the only MP that has brought this to the House of Commons.
To you. You've inspired her to do that.
But she is...
It's wonderful teamwork.
I wouldn't have been able to do this had Caroline not been able to, because I don't know politics enough. I'm a mum. But she has done that. And there are MPs that I will be, you know, cross those that could have attended that don't today. Because in my eyes, every single MP who is able to today should be attending, because this affects children up and down the country. My story is not unique. There are families that have been bereaved and there are children that have lifelong issues because of the result of their treatment. And this has to start changing.
I hope to meet you again. I hope to follow up with a progress report, and I thank you very, very much indeed for coming in. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
After the break, we will be speaking to Justin Madders, Labour MP and chair of the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Football Clubs, on the government's response to the FanLed review. Before that, it's time for your weather.
Hello, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. A dry and bright day for many of us. Cloud will build through the afternoon with showers for some, but no really significant rainfall in the forecast for today or the next few days as high pressure builds once again from the north, and we've got this north to northeasterly airflow, so it's turning a little chillier, and we'll notice that at night with a few overnight frosts, but also it's keeping things dry and bright for the vast majority. The best of the sunshine will be across central, southern and western parts of the UK, so for Northern Ireland, Wales, southern England. There'll be a few showers in the thicker cloud across northern and eastern England, and Scotland's going to be mostly dry, if rather cloudy. It will feel cool, particularly along that east coast, 9 to 12 Celsius with a cool easterly breeze, but 15 or 16 Celsius for southern England, South Wales, Northern Ireland, where we do see some sunny spells. The cloud and any showers tend to fade away overnight, leaving largely clear skies, and under those clear skies, with that colder air in place, we'll see a touch of frost. In some of the sheltered spots across northern parts of the country, -2, -3 Celsius is possible. Could even see a -1 in southern areas. But in urban parts, I think, will be frost-free. And it will be largely dry and bright once again as we start off Wednesday. Now, Wednesday, on the whole, is a sunnier day for Scotland and northern England, but a cloudier day further south. Nevertheless, 15 to 16 Celsius for southern England, South Wales, and 9 to 12 further north, but feeling more pleasant, I think, with the greater sunnier skies across Scotland and northern England compared to today, and virtually everywhere will be dry. And really that's the theme that continues for the rest of the week. Thursday, Friday into Saturday as well. High pressure holds on. It won't be entirely sunny all the time. There will be areas of cloud floating around, but it will be largely dry and bright.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you, or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Now, the government yesterday promised to back the main proposals from the FanLed review into English football. The report, commissioned by former Sports Minister Tracy Crouch MP, highlighted 10 key recommendations. Joining me now to talk about all of this is Justin Madders, Labour Member of Parliament for Ellesmere Port and Neston, and the captain of the parliamentary football team and chair of the all-party parliamentary group on football clubs. Welcome to you, Justin. Let's just start at the beginning. Why did we need this review, this fan-led review into football? What was going wrong?
Well, it's been needed for a long time. If you look at how successful our game is, it's our national game. We invented football. The Premier League is the envy of the world. There are billions of pounds going through the game, but actually recent examples of clubs like Bury, Oldham, Derby, they have all hit real troubles because of poor ownership, unscrupulous owners who haven't really got the same investment in the clubs as the communities and supporters. So something was going badly wrong, and it was high time that we got this independent regulator to make sure that clubs are owned and run in future for the interests of the fans in a sustainable and responsible way.
And just looking at some of the things that would be looked at are to re-examine the 1985 law that bans alcohol during games. Is that wise?
Well, it's always been a bit of an odd one, to be honest, because I can actually go and have a pint in the ground, but in the stands behind the pitch, but I can't take it out into the seats and where I would watch the game. And it's always seemed to me a bit of an odd situation because it doesn't apply in other sports. And actually, I think it is probably indicative of a fairly negative and hostile attitude towards football supporters that was around in the 1980s. The game has moved on dramatically since then. I think it's certainly a wise move to have a look at whether we need these rules in the 21st century.
The biggest issue in football for fans, the cost of tickets. What do we do about that?
Well, we've got to make sure that the game is run for the benefit of the fans. And I think that one of the main things that this new regulator will be able to do is ensure that clubs are run in a sustainable and responsible way in future, that new owners will have to provide credible business plans, that supporters will actually have a say in how their clubs are run in future, because it is our national game. It is something that everyone should have the opportunity to enjoy and participate in, go and see their local teams. And, you know, if you look at going to see a Premier League game with family four now, you're talking hundreds and hundreds of pounds to do that. And that is actually out of reach of so many people.
Now, you are captain of the MP's football team. Now, politicians have many talents. Can't imagine they're that good at football. Am I being unfair? Who do you play? Are you any good?
Well, obviously, I'm the best player in the team, but it is a very low bar. We mainly play good causes or organisations who we want to highlight the work of. We also have a regular match against the lobby, the journalists, which is a little spicier, shall we say. But I think the age profile of the team is probably not one where you would expect us to be rushing around the pitch like the Premier League stars. So we do our best. We try and highlight the good causes and issues that the teams we're playing against want to highlight. And it's a good way of just getting to know some colleagues as well, because exercise is really important, and it's good to have that kind of opportunity here in Parliament.
And finally, the government's also looking, as part of this review, into women's football in England, how to create a level playing field. It's overdue, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that the Women's Review hasn't been announced exactly what it's going to look at or who's going to chair it, but it does need to take place. I think women's football has come on leaps and bounds in recent years, but there are still a lot of things that need to be looked at. So, you know, I know some of my kids have played in mixed teams up to a certain age, but some of those girls haven't actually gone on to play any further because there haven't been the same opportunities that the boys have had. And I think that's really sad. So there are, I think, a lot more things we can do to increase participation for women and young girls.
Justin Madders, Labour MP, thank you so much. After the break, we'll be talking about the cost of living. But first, it's the news with Rosie.
It's 12:30. Good afternoon. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date today on GB News. Now let's start. Russia's foreign minister is accusing NATO of waging a proxy war in Ukraine. Sergei Lavrov says weapons sent to Kyiv by the West are legitimate targets. But the UK's Armed Forces Minister, James Heappey, says individual countries are supplying military aid, not NATO. His comments come as Germany agrees to send anti-aircraft systems to Ukraine. Downing Street says Boris Johnson will chair a committee to tackle the cost of living crisis in the coming weeks. The Prime Minister met his cabinet today and urged them to come up with innovative ideas to ease financial pressures on households. Well, the government's reviewing its push to promote the existing package of support instead of using new spending. The Speaker of the House of Commons is meeting the editor of the Mail on Sunday over an article about the Deputy Labour leader, which has widely been condemned as sexist. An anonymous Conservative MP was quoted as saying that Angela Rayner used her legs to distract Boris Johnson during Prime Minister's questions. Sir Lindsay Hoyle has described it as misogynistic and offensive. The number of children in the UK with hepatitis, that's now risen to 114, according to the World Health Organization. 10 of them have needed a liver transplant. The UK Health Security Agency says most of the cases of liver inflammation have affected the under fives. Experts are still trying to understand the cause of the spike in hepatitis cases. Heathrow losses as a result of the pandemic have now topped £4 billion. The airport says demand for travel is still volatile and it's forecasting another loss in passengers this year. It expects passenger numbers will continue to grow, but they'll still only be around 65% of pre-COVID levels. You're up to date. We're on your TV, online and DAB+ radio. This is GB News. Don't go anywhere. Gloria will be back shortly.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events And I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes & Co.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you, or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Local elections in many parts of Britain are just over a week away, and the government's keen to show it's doing something about the cost of living crisis. This morning, the Cabinet met and the Prime Minister urged his top team, we read, to do everything possible to help hard-pressed households. But is anything new actually happening, or are these just warm words? Here to tell us is our economics and business editor, Liam Halligan.
Good to see you, Gloria. Well, there's certainly a lot of spin going on here. You and I have been discussing for quite a few weeks now whether or not it's good politics to focus on Partygate. I know Keir Starmer had a bit of a heated discussion with Lisa Nandy in the Shadow Cabinet about that recently, with the Wigan MP, the former Shadow Foreign Secretary, now she's Shadow Community Secretary, saying, look, we need to focus less on political process, more on helping ordinary people with the cost of living. And the Tories feel the same thing, particularly ahead of these local elections at the beginning of May. So Boris is making a song and dance about getting the
Boris
cabinet...
Johnson.
a song and dance about getting people into the cabinet and coming up with ideas that can actually help ordinary people save money as the cost of living squeeze bites. But he's saying, but we can't afford to spend too much money. So it's things like ending the proposed ban on buy one, get one free deals in supermarkets, which was brought in to sort of tackle the obesity epidemic. It now seems insane, doesn't it? Things like when we import goods from countries around the world, we often charge tariffs on those goods, charges to import them into our country. The producers of those goods have to pay more. We don't have to charge those tariffs now we're outside the European Union. So we've got to get round to removing some of those tariffs on goods we don't produce ourselves, so we're not hurting British consumers. Goods like rice. We don't grow rice in the UK. So that could also happen. I also think you could see people being encouraged to claim the benefits that they're entitled to. Lots of older people don't claim the pension credit. A lot of people don't claim all kinds of child-related benefits, heating allowances that they may be entitled to. So I think it will be largely around the edges. But the big issue for me, Gloria, and I go back to the coverage, what we discussed the moment Rishi Sunak sat down during his spring statement back in March. Benefits, which is where the rubber really hits the road for low-income and vulnerable families, benefits are only going up by 3.1% this year. That was at the beginning of April. When you've got 6, 7, 8, 9, 10% inflation, the average rate at which prices are going up, there's a massive income cut there for those on low incomes. That is the problem.
And when we talk about benefits, because when you and I were growing up, people, when we talked about benefits, people who didn't work. But now it's lots of people who are in work but still need top-ups through the benefits.
That's right, because the jobs they do just don't generate enough money. They can work a 40-hour week, and the jobs they do don't create enough money to just get the basics of housing and food and fuel costs, just the very bare essentials. So for me, the government's always going to be playing catch-up with this because the upgrade in benefits was so much less than the headline rate of inflation. And we know, Gloria, don't we? You'll remember from your time as an MP, you and I discuss this all the time. The lower you are down the income scale, the more you're suffering inflation at the moment, because the inflation is really, the price rises are really happening in those necessities like food and fuel, not least since the war between Russia and Ukraine.
And I mean, I try to set up a direct debit for my energy. I'm not using them as my personal counsellor, but it's to illustrate a point.
Yeah.
So before April, and I didn't finish it, but I saw how much they wanted me to pay a month. And then I managed to do it on Sunday. And it was like nearly 3 times as much as if I'd have, as before the price cap finished.
Yeah.
But isn't there some suggestion actually energy companies might be setting it too high?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a lot of concern about this, and ministers are starting to take umbrage. The concern is that energy companies, and they will of course deny this, is that they're upping the direct debits in order to take money from you, saying, oh, we're helping you stage the payments, pay in advance. Are these energy companies using my cash, your cash, the cash of ordinary people who are, let's face it, cash-strapped and struggling, to bolster their own balance sheets so the companies themselves can try to survive? And then if the companies go bust, well, will you get that money back? Will those credits be transferred to a new provider? Will you lose money? A lot of concerns here about the use of this kind of front-loading of bills, and a lot of energy companies are doing this, and that's exaggerating the extent to which energy prices are actually going up. This is a very difficult and complex area. But for me, this is where politicians should be focused, going on less about process and who's up and who's down and the personalities, more about the policy and helping ordinary people.
It's a party-free zone on this show today. Apart from when I'm talking to you, obviously, Lee. Take care. Thank you so much. You can hear more about the cost of living crisis and how to tackle it from 1 o'clock on Liam Halligan's show, On the Money. Plus, he'll be speaking to amazing guests on the possibility of the government approving Britain's first coal mine in decades. Now, a new report by the Home Affairs Select Committee, that's a cross-party group of MPs, on spiking has been published today. The report finds that there's insufficient data to paint a whole picture on how widespread the problem is. Victims are sometimes dismissed as having one too many drinks, and the committee is calling for better support. Well, joining me now is Rachel McLean. She is the Safeguarding Minister, and I'm pleased to welcome her back to the show. Good to see you. Rachel, Minister, let's just, for those who are not familiar with the term spiking, could you just tell us how you define it?
Yeah, thanks for having me on again, Gloria. Good to see you. So spiking is an absolutely awful crime, and it really covers the issue of people having their drink spiked, something introduced in a drink when they're out in a bar or a nightclub, and also this newer phenomenon of needle spiking, which is particularly worrying. It's where apparently, and we have seen instances of this, some people are actually injected by a needle while they're out, obviously against their will. So it covers both of these crimes.
Have any idea of how often it's happening and where it's happening and who it's happening to?
Yeah, so obviously drink spiking is something it's been taking place for some time, but the needle spiking is something that we have paid particularly close attention to because it was a new and particularly frightening, I think, form of crime. We saw a lot of this when we had the lockdown easing and when we had sort of students going back to university and in those areas where there's a thriving nighttime economy, so bars, pubs and clubs, etc. We did immediately stand up a sort of Home Office response. We made sure that the police were responding to it, that they were gathering data, that victims knew where to go, because obviously our concern was, yes, this is a new phenomenon. We wanted to know as much as possible about it so that we could have the right response, so that people could actually go out and be safe and not be worried about having something as horrific as a needle spike attack happen to them.
And when victims go to the police or to the nightclub owners, that the report refers to victim blaming in some instances. Just explain that.
Well, I mean, look, can I say, first of all, I think the report is a really good report, and it does go through a number of the areas that are important, and actually the government is working on. And I want to be clear, victim blaming is completely wrong. And in the discussions that I have had with my colleagues across Department of Health and across policing as well, we've been very clear that it doesn't matter if you've had a drink or several drinks. That's what people do when they go on a night out. And it could also be the case that people have got other substances in their system, but that is not a reason not to come forward for help. So can I just put out very clearly that if you think you've been a victim of spiking, either by a drink or by a needle, please go forward and seek help. So we are issuing guidance across the board to A&E departments and also to GPs and all those primary care settings. If you're worried about something that's happened to you or a friend, please go forward and get help. And we're working really hard to make sure that all the healthcare professionals and policing colleagues know what they should do if a victim comes forward.
How likely is it for perpetrators of this awful crime to get caught and be punished?
Well, they need to be, and we're very clear about that. There are criminal offences that actually cover this, and some of them can attract sentences for as long as life. We have got a number of investigations ongoing. We are determined to bear down on this. My message is that if you think you can get away with this, then you're wrong. We will come after you. It's not right that perpetrators can go around and create a climate of fear. I mean, the reasons for doing this, I mean, it's been reported that people are just doing this because they think it's a laugh or it's funny. It's completely wrong. You need to stop, and law enforcement will be after you.
And do we need a specific law on spiking? I've spoken in the past with your colleague, Richard Graham, who has been trying to make this a specific law. It's sort of remarkable that it isn't really.
I want to be clear that we have laws already against this type of behaviour. So we already have laws that we are using to go after and hopefully bring to justice some of these perpetrators. As I said, they can be sentenced for as long as life. So if you're thinking this is something that's fun to do on a night out, I would say think again. But having said that, it is important that we've got the right laws. We're doing a very comprehensive review of our legal framework across all of our criminal justice system. And what we've said, we've been very clear that if we do need to legislate and make this a specific offence, then we'll do that. But I want to be clear that we have the laws to prosecute people already.
And if there are particular venues, particular nightclubs, which really seem to be having a bad record on spiking, should their licence be under threat?
Yeah, absolutely. And local authorities already have the powers to do that. So part of the work I'm doing is working with my colleagues in local government and just sending out that message to local authorities. You have the powers. You can go and close venues down if they're not taking the appropriate action to keep people safe. There's obviously a range of measures that they can use. They can require venues to put in additional security, for example. This is all part of the powers that they have. They need to be using those, and they need to be keeping on top of any incidents that are happening. There's no excuse really for any area and any nightclub to be sort of turning a blind eye to this. And actually I know that this is from my children who are regular nightclub goers. They tell me that actually there are searches and there is additional security happening in many venues. It's not something I can vouch for personally, but it is absolutely the right thing to be happening. And I would urge all nightclubs to look and see if they do need to put in place additional security, because it's in their interest. Obviously, we want women and girls to go out and feel safe.
We certainly do. Safeguarding Minister Rachel McLean, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Now, we're called a nation of animal lovers, but it doesn't always feel like that, with some people still treating animals terribly. But there are new measures which should help to protect animals and to stop cruelty. It will become law this week, and I'm delighted to be joined by the man who is responsible, Andrew Rosendale, Conservative MP for Romford and passionate campaigner for animal welfare. Welcome back to the show. It's
Hello, Gloria.
good to see you. So individuals who commit offences against animals could face fines of up to £5,000 under your new law. Just tell us, what's an offence against an animal? What's in that category?
Well, this is a brand new law, and it looks like, I can't say officially, but it does look like it's going to get royal assent very soon. And that means as soon as it gets royal assent, anyone that treats an animal in an unkind way, cruelty of any sort or neglect, or doesn't follow certain animal welfare regulations, so farm animals, zoo animals, pets, any animal, not a wild animal, but any domestic animal or animal used in agriculture, there can be a fine. Now, most of these offences will be fairly minor. Any serious offence, it will still go to court. They will still be prosecuted. But there are lots of minor offences that people tend to repeat. And by having a penalty notice, by able to fine them immediately, that forces them to rethink the way they're treating their animal. So it's going to be a huge change in the way we deal with animal welfare in this country. So the moment you do something that harms an animal, even if it's not intended, you know, a lot of cruelty in this country happens not intentionally, but by people forgetting or some form of neglect. It means they can be fined immediately.
And how do these cases come to light? How do the police know that somebody's been cruel to an animal in order to fine them or worse?
Well, in all kinds of ways. Clearly, local authorities, the police, different agencies, the RSPCA will discover these things. So at the moment, Gloria, what happens is that if there is a case that deserves some kind of punishment, if you've treated an animal in a way that is harmful to that creature, it has to go to court. Well, you and I know that that takes forever, and often a court case never happens.
Yeah.
So this avoids all of that. It does mean that instantly, if you do something wrong that involves an animal, you can be fined on the spot.
Right, OK, because there's a maximum sentence of 5 years in prison now.
Yes, that still applies.
But do many people end up in prison for animal cruelty?
Well, I mean, the most severe cases, they jolly well should, in my view. But most crimes against animals are very minor. They're people that just forget to do things, don't follow regulations,
Right.
you know, forget to do what they're meant to do in terms of the care and welfare of their creature. And this means that those sort of things can be dealt with without the rigmarole of prosecution and going to court and all the costs and the time involved in that. So in many ways, it can be used as guidance, just like a parking ticket, really. If you know you're parking wrongly, you get a ticket, you don't do it again. And the intention here is to act as a deterrent, to guide people in future to treat animals differently to ensure that the law is obeyed.
OK. You can tell how passionate people are about animal welfare in this country because on a Monday, when the public get to determine some of those petitions debate in Parliament,
Yes.
They're very often concerned with animals and animal welfare. So, for example, we think it's quite remarkable that, by the way, that the media don't cover those debates which are demanded by the public in Parliament. We think it's important on this channel. And on Monday, there was a debate demanded by the public on trail hunts. Is that something that you're concerned?
Well, that's not something I've been involved with,
Yeah.
that particular one. But the great thing about our system is that members of the public who are concerned about animal welfare, and let me tell you, you know this, Gloria, because you were an MP, it's the biggest issue. We get written to about animal welfare issues more than anything else.
Yeah.
People really do care about animals in this country. So in this system, the system we have, MPs can raise debates in Parliament, we can put questions down, petitions can be sent in, and we have debates on it. So all sorts of various animal welfare issues that are particularly niche to that particular animal or a particular area where animals are involved, whether it's zoos or farms or, you know, we had the circus debate a few years ago. That in the end, the animals and circuses, that was stopped. But there are many other areas where reform is still needed. So those of us who care passionately about animal welfare are always looking at new areas to improve the life of the animals which we have a duty of care over.
Indeed. While I've got you, briefing to the Sun newspaper this morning that cost of living was the top of the cabinet agenda today, that the Prime Minister was saying we've got to tackle this. What would you like to see to help people right now who are hurting?
Well, I remember the 1980s and I remember how difficult it was for people, and the 90s when people were losing their homes and they couldn't afford to pay their bills. The economy isn't always going to deliver prosperity. Sometimes the economy dips. And we're looking at various reasons why this is happening at the moment. The pandemic, I think, is clearly the most obvious reason. The economy is in difficulties. We're going to face a very tough few years, and the government has a duty to those who are most in need. So what I would like to see is if a government does new things, it should be helping those who are really in need. We shouldn't be, it's talk about VAT and things like that, which isn't targeted. I actually like the idea of targeting people that really do need that support. Those of us who don't need that support shouldn't get it. But those that do need it are the ones that we should be helping most. So whatever we do, let's target the support to the people that are most in need.
And I know you don't have a crystal ball, but maybe you're on the inside track. Do you think we might get some help before that autumn budget from the government?
I don't know what the Chancellor's thinking.
No.
I think it could well be needed, and I think the government has to be ready to act and be flexible if the need arises. But I say again, there is no point in doing things where everyone can benefit. Let's focus the need on the people that desperately need it. Let's not let people that can afford to pay their bills get a reduction. Let's help the people that genuinely need it. That's what I would like to see.
Final question. Are you confident about the local elections? They're not in all parts of Britain, but you know there are several bellwethers and tests of public.
Well, my borough of Havering is one of those where it's a Conservative-led council at the moment, but only a minority, and it could go any way. We have lots of different parties running. So yes, I'm interested to see what the result of this will be. But I think that most people should focus on what matters locally, because it won't change the government, it won't change the Prime Minister, but it could change the way your borough develops and the local services. So certainly in my borough, we're outer London, and I'm saying to people we need to keep it a town and country borough and not be sort of like inner London. We're very much Essex, and I want to keep that character. But other boroughs have different needs. So I think that the local people really should vote on what's best for their local borough. Forget national politics. Do what's best for your local community.
Andrew Rosendale, always grateful to have you on the show. Always
Gloria.
a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you so much. Thank you for watching and getting in touch today. Dulcie says, incredible piece bringing awareness to children's plight with cancer, and in particular Sophie. Wasn't she amazing? So utterly tragic, and your emotion was very moving, and a credit to you for keeping going. Love to Charlotte, who is being so incredibly brave, and well done to her MP Caroline for taking this up. All the best. What a nice message. Very nice of you to send that message. Ed says, full credit to you for the coverage of that lady's story. Touching, heartfelt, and a real serious look at that item. I hope every MP takes that seriously and listens to that poor mum. She's a brilliant advocate for that issue and deserves to be heard. Thank you, Gloria, for your compassion. Oh, I was trying to hold it together, so thank you for bearing with me. Parker says, whilst clubs are paying their players such ridiculous amounts of money, ticket prices will rise further to even more stupid rates. I can't understand where people get the money to waste on football. Surely they have higher priorities in life. You've been watching The Briefing with me, Gloria De Piero. Join me at 10 to 12 tomorrow for Prime Minister's Questions. Liam Halligan will be back with On the Money in just a moment, but first, it's your weather.
Hello, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. A dry and bright day for many of us. Cloud will build through the afternoon with showers for some, but no really significant rainfall in the forecast for today or the next few days as high pressure builds once again from the north, and we've got this north to northeasterly airflow, so it's turning a little chillier, and we'll notice that at night with a few overnight frosts, but also it's keeping things dry and bright for the vast majority. The best of the sunshine will be across central, southern and western parts of the UK, so for Northern Ireland, Wales, southern England. There'll be a few showers in the thicker cloud across northern and eastern England, and Scotland's going to be mostly dry, if rather cloudy. It will feel cool, particularly along that east coast, 9 to 12 Celsius with a cool easterly breeze, but 15 or 16 Celsius for southern England, South Wales, Northern Ireland, where we do see some sunny spells. The cloud and any showers tend to fade away overnight, leaving largely clear skies, and under those clear skies with that